Hello and welcome to another episode of Global Chit Chat, the show where we talk about matters pertaining to a global arena. And as always, joining me on the show is our expert on foreign policies, Sri Devesh Singh. Many Sri Devesh, welcome to Global Chit Chat once again.
Thank you very much, Akash. Wish you and the viewers a very happy new year. And
And
hope
same to you, Sri Devesh.
2023 brings peace, global peace, prosperity, and less uncertainty.
Yes, exactly. That is all we are wishing for. A little bit of less, uncertainty when it comes to the global arena. And well, starting off with our very favorite topic on the show is China. And of course, now South Korea just a few days ago, came out with their latest strategy when it comes to the Indo-Pacific region. And very interestingly, there was not too much mentioned about China, and it was very much, heavy on the US side. So, how do you view this? This is, South Korea moving, trying to get a little bit more pally with the United States of America, and trying to, miss the dragon out there.
So I think very interesting. If you look at the fine print, the first thing is that in a way, it's a continuity of certain visions of the Indo-Pacific of other countries. So it's very similar. Even if you look at the vision of ASEAN countries, most of them, they want to benefit obviously from economic relations with the US. They realize that the global supply chains are changing, but at the same time, they have their own constraints because of the logic of geography. So obviously, they're closer to China. They don't want to get into conflict with them. So that part is clearly visible. In fact, if you read the strategy, there is a mention of uh, China as an important partner, even in the strategy that is there. So that's one thing we need to look at. The other is there is a lot of emphasis. Obviously, there are geopolitical issues. There's a reference to Taiwan. There's an expression of concern about that.
Right.
There is, but what all these strategies are basically trying to do. If you look at ASEAN, if you look at South Korea, right? Uh, Japan is a bit different. Japan obviously has a different relationship with China, so it's
Correct.
quite clear about it. It's part of the Quad as well, so that is different. Uh, but East Asian, Southeast Asian visions of the Indo-Pacific strategy are a bit different from the Western ones. The Western ones have taken a very clear stance with regard to China that they want to move away, reduce the dependence, while keeping the doors open for a working relationship on certain issues like the environment, some global trade issues, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, that they're not going to depend totally on China, and the relationship is not likely to go back what it was, let's say in the previous decade, right?
Correct.
South Korea is trying to play, on the one hand, it's trying to play a balancing act.
Mhm.
On the other, it's also spoken about closer relations with the Quad. So this is just some of the important points which I think uh, need to be examined in the context of the strategy.
Right.
And the other point which I would also like to make is specifically in the context of India, the relationship has been building up over the past especially in the aftermath of the economic reforms,
Right.
economic relations built up. There's a very clear emphasis on economic ties. And perhaps after the Canadian vision on Indo-Pacific strategy, even though they're different in certain ways, this is one which has a lot of emphasis on economic ties and on people-to-people ties. So that is visible clearly in the case of India. And then, of
Correct.
course, there are other regional issues. There is, as I said earlier, also the issue of North Korea has been given precedence. So South Korea, basically, if you look at it, it's tried to look at its own geography, look at its
Right.
own interests, but also realized the the broader that the global political order is changing,
Right.
and you cannot afford to be static. You need to move along, and you need to make the right course corrections and so on. So I think that is quite evident.
Right, right. And when you say, doing a little bit of course correction on the part of South Korea, but if we, see in a global perspective right now, like a few days ago, Xi Jinping had this, meeting with Vladimir Putin also. And so how do you view this, that, with China now siding with to some extent, siding with Russia, and we have seen in the United Nations also. So
Mhm.
does that also affect China's credibility on the global platform, that it is siding with Russia? Though India has also been, on to some extent, been siding with Russia as far as the export of crude oil is concerned, and taking certain stands in the United Nations. But India has been playing it very smartly in terms of keeping its diplomatic connections with the West also, especially Australia, Canada, China, pardon, America, and all those countries. So how do you view this? That as far as China is concerned, it is feeling a bit left out in the global arena, as it stands firmly with Russia.
No, I see. China has also played it post the G20 meeting in Indonesia. They have tried to give out this impression that they want to engage with the West as well.
Right.
So, and probably the West has also, certain countries, certain US allies have also realized that they need to have a working relationship with China, as I mentioned, even in terms of economic ties, like we discussed a couple of weeks ago about the Australian foreign minister's visit to China, right? So that all is important. And so China has realized that, that it needs a working relationship with the West, and the West can also not all of a sudden give up on it. So it's trying to hedge that. But at the same time, in the aftermath, I mean, if you look at Xi Jinping's leadership, more so in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, I don't think China has been taking advantage of the global order and global systems and so on and so forth. But I don't think it's really committed or adhered to any one of them at all. So
Correct.
in recent years, this is a change, mind you, under the leadership of Xi Jinping. It wasn't the case earlier. Whatever
Right.
Deng Xiaoping may have said or his successors may have said. So I think Xi Jinping's leadership has been a turning point in that context. So basically, uh, you speak of globalization, you make the right noises about global trade whenever trade sanctions basically hit you. But at the same time, you keep on parallelly speaking about a parallel order, about a Chinese model, new Chinese terms coming in, right? And that whole thing about uh, there's even earlier there was talk of, like, so for instance, earlier there was a talk about peaceful coexistence. Now the emphasis is more on a Chinese model, right? And on let's say, even if it's socialism with Chinese characteristics. So there has been a change that way.
So Dinesh, now moving on from South Korea, let's move a little bit closer as far as India is concerned, much more closer in terms of international ties, and let's talk about what has happened in Israel. And Benjamin Netanyahu, has been elected the prime minister, and he's forming the government for the sixth time there in Israel. But very interestingly, what has happened is, like, UAE has now shown a little bit of more closeness towards Israel. So how do you view this in terms of a global arena, when we talk about global ties? UAE, which is predominantly an Arab nation, trying to pally up with the Jew nation. How do you view this?
No, no, this change has been happening since the. It's been happening over again. Behind the scenes, there has been something. The churning has been happening for a while. Especially, it began with the ties between Gulf countries and Iran deteriorating, and also the US played an important role first in the Gulf countries getting close to Israel. Then you had the Abraham Accords, obviously in 2020, which took this process further. And now other Gulf countries are also in the process. It's not just UAE, Bahrain. You had some other Arab countries, right? So that all is happening. What we've seen is we've seen a rise in even in economic linkages between
Right.
both countries, right? So, and in fact, I think Netanyahu is probably even planning a visit now soon to
Hmm.
UAE. So political ties have strengthened, economic relations have strengthened. There are some synergies in the areas of startups. Israeli companies are interested in, especially in Dubai, seeing the economic landscape over there. And GCC countries are also focusing on their economic vision. So there's a lot of scope for finding synergies between both countries in the startup ecosystem. So apart from the hard geopolitics, security of the Middle East, this is one aspect which you need to look at. Obviously, the Middle East can no longer be looked at from earlier lenses.
Right.
With with ties between Gulf countries and Israel improving, now there is actually even talk about some Gulf countries wanted to normalize their relations with Iran, because there's a realization in GCC countries that if you need to look at a new economic paradigm, you need to look at your foreign policy approach also needs to be changed. And if you notice
Correct.
that a number of countries which were earlier not so proactive in foreign policy or taking a firm stance on certain issues and so on, that has changed. Obviously,
Hmm.
you have earlier it was Saudi Arabia just taking the lead. Now Qatar has also become important. UAE has also become important, and there is a bit of competition amongst these three, four GCC nations in terms of being more proactive in the realm of foreign policy.
Correct, correct, and of course, let's hope that for the prosperity of the region, these kind of relationships keep on happening, and the development takes place, and of course, to some extent, India will also be gaining a bit from that. And coming to India, Devesh, how do you view this? The G20 summit, happening across the nation. We are seeing that delegates coming in, visiting different parts of the country. So in terms of India, I want to close it on an Indian perspective. How do you view this as far as India coming out of the COVID pandemic? We are opening up, and the hospitality business here in India is definitely booming. We have seen in the couple of months, as far as India is concerned, it has been booming. And what role will G20 summit will play? Will it open new avenue, new gates for the tourism industry, the hotel industry here in India?
Certainly, there is the geopolitical aspect. There's a global economic landscape we all know about, and I mean, in fact, I think the IMF recently spoke about this a possible global recession. Certain countries being hit more than others. So it's a very important time, and India has also said that it will want to take the lead on issues like climate change. So there is obviously that component that it is an important phase, and there are numerous opportunities. But in
Right.
terms of the tourism, the fact that uh, over 200 events are being held in 50 cities of different parts of India, which will get a
Hmm.
chance to showcase their unique culture and heritage and so on and so forth. That is one thing. And then
Correct.
obviously the the tourism industry been ever since, I would say, the from 2021 onwards there was a recovery, and even in between you had phases. So for instance, in 2020, for some time when things had normalized, that
Hmm.
last phase of 2020, you saw more domestic tourism, you saw the phenomena of staycations, you saw all that happening. Now on the one hand, obviously, what is going to happen is that there'll be greater awareness about
Correct.
cities outside Delhi, which is very important. And on the other, obviously the uh, tourism will pick up. I mean, obviously the hotels and all will have it. And in certain places, you may need more hotels because,
Correct.
they, we talk about big cities, but even certain tier two cities do not have enough, hotels. So it could give a boost in that sense, not just in the short run, because I think actually if domestic tourism does well, it's a very important. What we often look at international tourists, but even if you look at domestic tourism, it's very
Hmm.
important. Now, for instance, if you look at the Northeast as a region, there are going to be events in the Northeast. Greater awareness
Correct.
about the Northeast means not just foreign tourists coming in, but even from India, more tourists going there.
Correct.
So, India by itself is a very big market. And if something like tourism picks up, it gives a boost to jobs. And at this point of time, when there are global economic challenges, and India is not immune, to all that, at least if, let's say, if tourism picks up, it could blunt the impact of that on the overall economy.
True, true. So let's hope that people here in India also try to find a little bit of more of India thanks to the G20 summit. Well, on that note, thank you, Devesh, for joining me on Global Chit Chat and sharing your insight about what is happening in the world as of now. And we will definitely like to hear from our audience also. So if you have any kind of suggestion, please do mention it in the comment section below. And do follow One India News and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And once again, thank you, Devesh, for joining
Thank
me
you
on
very
Global
much,
Chit Chat.
Akash. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.